Well, here we are for day 3 of the sawmill build, and that's Cinna, our farm cat, our longest lasting. Hey, Romy's coming over to say hi. How you doing, Romy? Come on, Romy, come here. Sit, sit, sit. Good boy, shake a paw. Good man. Not bad for a year-old. He's doing okay. So, those are a couple of my helpers here for this little Edger Woodmizer EG100 build. No, it hasn't been 3 full days by any stretch of the imagination. Don't want anyone thinking that. It's Howard at 82 Maple, and I did a little bit of work just to preset some stuff for this stage of the build. It's going to be finished today. It won't take very long. And so here's what's happening. We got the outfeed table on. You'll see the supports down there. Everything's pinned in. Great little table leg supports. I got the extensions. That's a sweet little extension. The leg protrudes at a slightly outward angle to keep it from collapsing on itself. It's a great setup because, as you see, this table extension is just outside of the roof area, and that table will fold up very nicely. Just push that leg in and the table will sit right about here. So that's going to work well. Just about ready to put the engine on. A couple more things to do before we get to that. I just kind of laid out my tools. Everything was a bit of a mess on the last day that I'd been building here. Pre-assembled a couple of little components that are really straightforward, and then just wanted to spend a couple of minutes on this. So this is the support for the infeed table, and you'll have seen its twin on the outfeed table. And so it came in the package without this leg extension. And so here was my dilemma. I'll talk about it a little more later on, but I was bouncing back and forth with the dealer saying these leg extensions, or this support, simply does not fit these brackets down here on the base of the little EG100. And what was missing were these supports. And I looked everywhere to make sure that I hadn't missed something. The manual was a little bit unclear. You had to kind of take a look at the manual twice to figure out that there were supports, the extensions needed. And finally, I had the presence of mind to open up the engine box here. And there's a neat little compartment right down inside. And I guess somebody just needed a little extra room for the shipment, and that's where I found my extensions. So if you're finding or seeming that there's some parts missing, open everything. That was a key takeaway for me. So pretty straightforward. There's a package that's well labeled for the supports. You put the nut on. I use an 11/16 deep socket on this. Put the washer on. I actually had to raid a little bolt bin that I have. I'm kind of a stickler for putting washers on stuff like this. I don't like to use the nuts only. You pop it in like that. Then what we're going to do is just go around this side, and we get in there to where the bolt is, and going to spin a nut on there, and that's going to be better done with 2 hands. But that's where we'll pick up this little video. And hey, day 3, and I think the last day of this little build. Before the end of the day, I want to run that board through the edger. That's 16 feet long, 1.5 inches thick, and I'm going to turn it into some 1.5 by 3s for the little project that I've got going out here. You'll see it under the green tarp. It was featured, or will be featured, in an upcoming video, and it's a little combination work shed with a playhouse for a granddaughter and grandson above it. So we'll be off to that. Just bear with me for a moment now. I'm going to put the camera onto a solid stand, and we'll be off and running. Okay, we've got the infeed table on. Still some bolts to tighten there, but just wanted to give you a little glimpse inside the chain drive assembly and how everything is supposed to come together. I'll just pause on this for a moment. If somebody is wondering exactly how it should look like, and what I have to put on is, we see these black knobs here yet. I have to attach that in here. Some other odds and ends, got to put the cover back on, but I actually want to run it a little bit without the cover and just make sure everything's working well and that there isn't strange noises emitting from somewhere that cause me to have to pull the cover back off. So we're going to walk around to the other side now and take a little look at the engine. And here's one of my only significant complaints about the process, and that is that the manual could be a lot better, the assembly manual, in my opinion. So here's what we've got. We've got up here on page 324 the first kind of indicator that this is the step now in figure 327 here that we're supposed to put the engine on. And then the manual just jumps straight back into feed tables and other things, all of which are important. And it's not until page 5.5 here in the manual that we start to get a sense of how these pulleys are supposed to go for the gasoline engine. There's an electrical engine option. And if one went by this diagram, it would indicate that there's a large pulley down here, and that would be this guy right here. Okay, it's going to actually sit there without rolling off my little table here, just for purposes of this demonstration. And again, back to the diagram, that would line up, and that would be a pulley that goes onto the machine. And then this smaller pulley, which would be this one here, and if one looks at the shape and so on, would be the upper one that goes off the engine. However, I'm just going to do a little pivot here now. And if we look at this, the engine pulley is clearly, the engine output shaft is clearly higher than the machine shaft. Let me just focus on that. Then the machine shaft. And further, let's just walk this back slowly to our diagram. If I were to try and put this larger pulley with that particular keyway onto the key on the machine, which is kind of what's indicated here, that is just a no-fit situation. This key here, it's already been put in at the factory, but it's significantly wider than this key, and this key comes out of the output shaft on the engine, meaning the only pulley that will fit on the engine would be this one, matching keyway. And just again, so that we walk through this slowly and carefully, this key from the engine fits that little clutch assembly perfectly. And I'm just going to put it back in here. It has to be tapped into place, but that's what it should be. So, in fact, the only diagram in the manual is misleading. You know, that's partly what I love about these little projects, is it's putting the puzzle pieces together. It could be frustrating for some, but I look at it as a little exercise in engaging one's intellectual horsepower and problem solving. And so here we are at 82 Maple, and we'll keep putting this thing together. I think I've got a time lapse running, and onward. Okay, we're getting close here. So we've got the engine in place. I filled it with oil. A little awkward to get to the oil filler from this side, but as is very common now, there's an oil filler on the other side. Just giving you one last look at the pulley placement. I think we've got this in a good spot in terms of overall alignment. And so clearly on, let me just grab a pointer here of some sort. The pulley that goes on the machine mount protrudes in towards the machine. There's also a hole here for a little keeper to thread into. And I don't like this just free floating. It didn't come with any of those set screws, and I'm personally not a big fan of that. There may be a reason, but I'm going to watch this closely. I don't think the pulley can come off of there. In fact, it can't as long as the belts are on. But I just kind of like to put a little screw in there, if for nothing else, on the keyway side, being that particular key wasn't as tight fitting as the one on the engine. I'm going to go in search of a little set screw there. Give you another view at the engine pulley. So the belts on the inside of that one, the belts on the outside of this one, if one accounts for the little pulley protrusion in towards the machine. And that seems to align perfectly with how the bolts are positioned down here on the bottom of the engine, the four engine mount bolts. Now, I'm a big fan of good design, and there's some elements of this that are less than thoughtful. So this little block here that I'm pointing at right now, and this little set screw, set bolt, is going to tighten that little black block. It's going to tighten it in the direction that I'm pointing, press up against the engine, and give me some belt tension there. On the other side of the engine, I've got another little block with a bolt in it for a similar purpose. So the objective really is here that I'm going to tighten the other side to get the appropriate belt tightness, and it's going to move in towards this block, and then I'm going to tighten this bolt, and that'll hold the engine in the correct position. Then I hit the mount bolts with a wrench, or more likely in this case, I'm going to go underneath with an impact gun, put a wrench on here, and just tighten everything down into place. Now back to design. So this is one of the spots right here where I can drain my engine oil. Now that's going to make a mess all over this pan, pretty much impossible to capture. What we needed here is a hole of some size and substance, and there's all sorts of little remote or drain tubes that you can get for these engines. So I'm going to have to go and hunt of one, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Is I'll mount that. What we'll do is we'll come down underneath here, and there I'll have myself a little drain tube so I can capture the oil. It's impossible to keep the oil off the ground the way it's designed on this side. Let's go around to the other side though, and oh, look at that. It's even worse. So once this set block is in place and this bolt has gone through and is holding that, it's actually going to be impossible, at least while the belts are new, to get that plug out to drain the oil. So just not a great design. It's okay. I'll make it work. Hey, I'm just getting this engine installed, and a couple of other things that I wanted to draw to your attention around the engine. So I had this all bolted down here, and you know, you never want to get done a job and be looking in the bolt box and there's leftover pieces. So I'm looking for just what I have left to assemble, and it turns out that there's a little bag with a bolt and a little bushing, and it needs to go on the end of the engine shaft to secure this pulley and clutch assembly. Now, nowhere in the assembly manual did it deal with that. What one has to do is go towards the back of the book here on, what have I got, page 3.4 and section 3.2, and if one goes down here and looks closely at the engine and follows this through, so there I've got my little clutch assembly, and there's a bolt showing there, and then if one looks up part number whatever it is, 29 over here, there's a washer for the clutch, zinc it says, and then there's a bolt number, I don't know, it's accompanying, bolt number 25. And so if you match that up, that pretty much deals with the part that was still in my bolt box. Again, not dealt with at all in the main assembly area of the manual. Further, as I was running this tensioner up in just a little earlier in this video, I didn't like that it was pushing against the engine block. You can see the mark there. It was pushing right where the serial number is. And I thought, well, that could be a little better. I really don't like tensioning a bolt against a cast housing. So in the same little baggie that this bolt and bushing washer were located were a pair of these little guys. No description, nothing. Best I can figure in looking at things is that one goes here, and that'll take that tensioner bolt, and then around the other side we have a tensioner block and bolt, and this I anticipate is going to go on this corner of the engine housing. I wish I could be a little clearer about this, but I'll do a little walk around with the camera here as soon as I have the engine back in place. One more thing. So this is the guide that is going to bolt on this side of the infeed table. And so there's a nifty little bolt here you'll see with a shoulder on it that fits that quite nicely, and then that whole assembly attaches in between here, flips up, and acts as a straight edge going down here. Well, the holes here are inordinately large. In fact, that bolt head goes right through there. So what you're looking for in your parts box, and again, these were in a little baggie, all of their own, and these are, again, a couple of machined washers, and they're going to go right in there, one on each side, and that's going to take that machined bolt, and it'll be a nice tight fitting. Just some little mysteries again that aren't dealt with in the assembly manual, so I'm hoping this is helpful. I'm hoping I'm doing a semi-decent job of articulating this so that it won't take the assembly time for you that it did for me. Stay tuned. More to come.